You've seen the title and the thumbnail, and I just want to reiterate the fact that these are, in my opinion, the best $30 or 2,000 peso IEM that I've physically tried. Alright, so the Letshuoer D02 is my first run-in per se with Letshuoer, and as per usual, all my thoughts and opinions like presented in this video are of course my own, and here's the proof. Now, with that out of the way, I want to show you this, and this, and then lastly, this, as well as that. I'm clearly washed up, and although I still aim better than a silver and carry harder than bronze, I can no longer 1v9. But what does that mean for you specifically? Well, I need all the help that I can get in competitive esports titles like Valorant and R6. So things like knowing where enemies are coming from just from the sound is extremely important now that I'm almost always sick and I'm as low as that guy. And you also probably want to get like to a higher rank, in which case this product right here will definitely help. That said, here are the 4 things that I like and 3 things that I don't quite like, with the last being the gray area where I think the subjective nature of the hobby will completely take over the decision of whether or not you should buy the D02s. Let's start first with what I like. Number 1, of course, is gaming. But why? And why competitive esports titles specifically? That's because of how these are tuned. See that? That blue line is the True Ear Hexa, known as one of the thinnest sounding IEMs that a lot of people, including myself, well, like, but it's also disliked by a lot of the masses. And that red line right there is the bass response of the Letshuoer D02. To say that these are thin sounding, especially once you try them for the first time, is a massive understatement to say the least. And whoop, 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 bam! That's the treble and air regions. The perceived technicals like the soundstage, imaging, detail retrieval, separation, and like everything else basically are affected by those regions. And depending on how the bass is tuned relative to the treble and air, 1, the details can be balanced with everything, which is good. Number 2, the bass can overpower the details of everything, which is bad. Or 3, it can be peaky and shouty, which is painful. In which case, the 8K region of the D02 is far tamer compared to the Hexa, but that 18K hertz range, well, let's be honest, like younger people such as myself will definitely hear more of the difference there versus like older folks in the channel. And although the rig here used is a clone of an IEC 711, which is bound to have a lot of variance in these regions, which are already hard to measure even with legitimate ones, the narrative stays the same. It's only really good for gaming? Well, to answer that question, I have to like state my problem first, because I find these to be single purpose in terms of its tuning, unless of course if you use EQ, but I'm not going to like get into that because that's an entirely different rabbit hole that I have yet to barely even enter. But going back to the narrative, these are bright leaning to say the least, and that means that typical genres like pop, EDM, rap, then get me started on like J-pop and K-pop as well, and like pretty much everything else either sound boring, thin, or just downright painful for me even after using these for a week straight, from like playing games to commuting. So unless you plan on listening to these with less volume or really giving it a lot of time to settle with a thing called head burning, you will hate these. I mentioned the volume, right? But before I continue there, like if you like the video or if you like formats just like what I'm trying right now, make sure to let me know in the comment section below, and make sure to subscribe as well while you're at it. Alright, the volume. You don't need a dedicated DAC, amp, whatever, it doesn't matter if you plug in like straight to your 3.5mm jack, if it even exists, or an underpowered jack. I know this is like underpowered, but I can't buy a new dongle DAC because I'm poor. And it doesn't matter. I run these at 40 to 45% on my laptop, 10% hardware volume on heavy music while like at home, and 11 to 12% hardware volume while I'm out and about, as I've never really found myself wanting more volume when just jamming out the music, but I always needed to lower the volume even when I'm outdoors. Speaking of outdoors, this has the puck Although these catch fingerprints like an eyeglass lens that's literally on your face the entire day, not being touched, it somehow still gets smudged by fingertips. I can personally forgive that though, because like, look at here. This is amazing. I mean, look at it. It looks like a precision engineered fidget toy that's, let's be honest, very cheap for what it is. You also get a 0.78mm 2-pin cable that's stiff upon first handling, but boy oh boy does this cable feel good after like what, 2 days? And as if that's not enough, for $30 by the way, you also get 6 additional pairs of silicone ear tips on top of like the pair that's already like pre-attached to the IEMs, which are labeled for balance with the stiffer like tips with the black core and vocal for the softer tips with the translucent core. Now I'm going to pass off first on the tips since this part is mostly up to comfort, but speaking of the comfort, I want to start with the build. The diameter of the housing is at a 15.75mm, and if we take into account like the connectors at the top, the height is at 20.3mm, the entire housing being like a 12.2mm deep. Nozzle lip diameter is at 6.4mm, acoustic chamber diameter at 5.8mm, and the entire nozzle piece is only about 6mm long. Weight wise, the single earpiece is at 4.79 grams, and the entire package with the cables and tips are at 25 grams. This basically means that the Letshuoer D02 is light, small, well built with like the aluminum front and the polycarbonate back, and will more probably like fit your ears if it's not for this small damn nozzle. No shame to like smaller people, as I'm also small, short, hobbit size as some would say, but the comfort leans towards like your ear anatomy. I mean, hey, go figure. And how deeply recessed is your ear canals relative to everything else inside of your ears. Let me explain. See this right up here? These are the ear tips that you get. Now, notice how I'm not using any of them. That's intentional because these are short and my ear canals are deep compared to like the surrounding area that causes the polycarbonate back of the D02s to touch and expand this inner part of my ears as the housing touch practically everything. Now obviously, if you have the money or if you've been like in the hobby for quite a while or quite some time, you've probably already have a lot of tips out there just for tip rolling. But with the $30 price tag these have, Letshuoer is obviously targeting the beginners and the first time buyers. And with that caveat, I give you the Achilles heel. I've mentioned that the build was good, right? Like aluminum outer, polycarbonate inner, good stuff. But the problem is this. You see that? I removed the cables once and I fractured the plastic piece for the 2-pin connector, and that's a no-no. Sure, I can be blamed for how roughly I tried to like remove the cables and whatnot, but surely the connectors shouldn't have cracked the first time I tried to remove the cables, and that like the cables doesn't need this much force to remove, right? Because let's be honest, like if you're buying this for gaming and gaming only, you definitely want these to last long, look fresh, and have a longer cable later down the line, unless you don't mind or you're just a dirty boy. Then comes the gray area. Tonality and the technicals. These two parts are difficult to balance, at least like based on my observations with budget IEMs like the D02, because if you want fun, it's literally going to require some form of bass or like add a bit of a bass to the tuning, unlike this one. And if the amount of the sub bass and the lower mids are not balanced well with the mids, upper mids, treble, and then the air, then you get an IEM that doesn't sound detailed or particularly hi-fi, and they would sound like a cheaper pair. In which case, I've mentioned this a while ago, like head burn-in, right? That's real, and it basically just means getting used to a new product, and most people I've encountered get used to a new IEM with a completely different sound in like 2 to 3 days tops, where I'd even say that tonality as a whole is mid and very reliant on how much upper mids and like treble can you actually take before feeling fatigued. In my case, I like these a lot for orchestra like a London Music Works test drive, as they sound very wide for a $30 IEM, and rock from like the likes of Iron Man with Black Sabbath onwards to something like say Bon Jovi's Bed of Roses, since electric guitar segments sound crunchy and engaging. And on the topic of head burn-in, I got used to them like for 2 days of constantly listening to them because I already liked a brighter sounding IEM before them. I was able to sort of like these for music as well, but I say sorta here because it's almost a guarantee that I'll feel fatigued with the sound after a good 1 to 2 hours of listening. And if that doesn't get me, like, the comfort and how I wear them will absolutely do the trick, where if I wear them too deep, my ears turn red and it hurts a lot. Now, comparing these to its peers like the D02, the CCA Phoenix, and one of my standards with the same ish tuning, the Twitter Hexa, all I can say is that for budget gaming, competitive gaming, no brainer is Letshuoer D02. Just go for that. But for everything else, like including music, pick the D02 if you require the bass but still want a balanced sound, and pick the CCA Phoenix if you want a bit more sub bass for music but has the treble in air to be good for gaming. As for the Hexa, I'd say like gaming performance is almost a match, and I like a bit more technical performance overall, but I do get fatigued more with the D02 compared to the Hexa, and that's definitely saying something. That said, I rate the Letshuoer D02 at a solid B- as a gaming IEM, where I beg you to try them first if you're planning to use them for anything more than gaming. I've been Charles, that's been the Letshuoer D02 once again, and take care.